What do you guys remember about the Eastern Orthodox from way back when we talked about them the first couple chapters of the book? How are they similar to, say, Roman Catholics? What are some of the key ideas? Yeah.
Like transubstantiation, like the Mass.
Yeah, they all have a Mass. They don't use the term transubstantiation, but they do believe that the bread and the wine become literally the body and blood of Jesus. So liturgy is very important for them. What else do you remember? There's a lot of tradition, right? You guys remember the stuff about the icons and the church councils, all that sort of stuff. Eastern Orthodox have a lot in common with Catholics, more than they do with most Protestants. And where are you going to find Eastern Orthodox in the world? What are the big areas? Or ethnicities? We can talk about that.
Eastern Europe, Baltic.
Yeah.
Russia.
Okay, so we'll put that one up because that's going to play a major role in the story. So Russia, let's say the Baltic states, and those would be Estonia and Latvia, not Lithuania, which is Catholic. Eastern Europe and Southern Europe, right? So Serbia, Macedonia, Bulgaria, Romania, all those are Slavic countries too. We're leaving somebody out that's very important to the story, though. Yeah.
The Greeks. Very
good. Particularly for the American part of the story. And we could talk about a few other things. Syrians, you know. We're also leaving out of this part of the story the Oriental Orthodox, like the Coptic and Ethiopians. They're going to have a larger role through immigration later on. So the Eastern Orthodox, how do they end up here in the United States? A lot of them end up coming through Ellis Island, like the Catholics. So that Greeks would be doing that. A lot of these ethnicities here, and the Russians, but the Russians also got here a different way. They come from further west. What does that mean? Where are they going to? You guys remember how people made fun of Sarah Palin for saying she could see Russia from her backyard? Where does she live?
Alaska.
Yeah. I mean, at least nominally. Nowadays she's on the lecture circuit all the time. But yeah, she lives in Alaska. And there's a lot of Russian presence in Alaska. They're the ones we got Alaska from. We actually thought it was a bad deal when we first bought it. They called it Seward's Folly, because he was the guy who organized the sale. The Russians had been there for, several hundred years, and they did mission work, and they established an Orthodox presence in Alaska. They actually did mission work to a lot of the Native Americans there that lasted for quite some time. So once, if we put Alaska out of it and we look mainly at the immigration coming in through the east, we have all these groups settling down in different places. Your book talks in particular about the Russians and about the Greeks, because those are the largest groups in the United States. Those are the ones that really dominate Orthodoxy in the United States. So it says, during the years following the Civil War, Eastern Orthodox immigrants began to settle. They generally worshiped at Russian-founded parishes. The Russians were the ones who came in first, quite often. And then as, say Serbians or Bulgarians would come in, they would take over that parish and begin doing the liturgy in that language. And but they kept a lot of the same practices, because all of them are sharing the same basic body of beliefs and practices. All of them have icons. All of them have the same type of mass, just in somewhat different languages. So the Russian leadership, like it says, welcomed this expression of what they call Pan-Orthodoxy. So that's a good word to put down. Pan-Orthodoxy. Orthodoxy. What does that mean? Anytime you see pan, what should you think? Not frying pan, but like the prefix pan. Yeah.
That's like a wide spectrum.
Exactly. Yeah, it means all, literally, in Greek. So yeah, it's going to be a wide spectrum. They're all more or less on the same page. So they were willing to appoint priests of other backgrounds to positions of responsibility. The Greeks, however, are a little bit different. They prefer to worship in their own familiar languages and traditions, and so we get this diversity within the Orthodox community. And your book talks about a number of the sort of ways in which these pan out. Spends a little bit of time talking about the Greeks, and I suppose it's good to dwell on this. It might seem a little bit of trivia, but what industry did the Greeks really make it big in? Does anyone know? Still leaves a mark today. The restaurant business. A lot of Italian restaurants are not Italian owned. They're actually Greek owned. Throughout the entire United States. There's a sort of, restaurants are one of the businesses that you can open up without an awful lot of working capital. And once you make it, you can sell it to somebody else and move on or start doing more restaurants. So Greeks end up becoming restaurateurs, confectioners, stationers. There's all sorts of ethnic towns that arise because of this. Greek towns, Russian towns. And your book also talks about one other thing. That's kind of an interesting bit of the story. Uniate Christians, or Uniate Catholics, were members of these groups who in the old country had left the Orthodox Church and become Catholic, and usually as large groups. When they come over to America, one of the things that tended to turn them off was, they had, the Uniate Catholics in other places, like in the Ukraine, for example. Ukraine, was for a long time part of Russia, right? But a lot of Ukrainians became Uniate Catholics. And what that meant was they were allowed to keep their liturgy. They were allowed to continue on with their rituals, their practices. They didn't have to conform to the Roman rite. When they came here to the United States, a lot of them were told, well, no, you're not going to be able to do that anymore. So they actually reconverted and became Orthodox. Some of them still are, within the Catholic Church, and we'll talk about that. The Russian story gets a little bit complicated because of one event. What's the key event that raises all sorts of problems? Remember, Russian Orthodoxy, you don't have a separation of church and state. So, the bishop or the patriarchs and the rulers are closely connected with each other. What happens in Russia in 1917? Yeah.
The Russian Revolution.
Yeah. So, why is that important? You have a revolution. Who takes over in the Russian Revolution? Eventually. I don't mean at the very start. I know that it's complicated. There's a provisional government. By, say, 1920, who has power in Russia? And holds on to it till about 1989. Yeah.
Communism.
Right.
There's really no place for religion, communist country.
Yeah. Now, the Russian Orthodox Church didn't close its doors. And the Patriarch of Moscow is now in hostile territory. And he's the head of the church. So, you might say, well, can you actually follow him now? Because he's going to be ruled by these communists, and they're going to use him as a tool. As a matter of fact, they didn't get rid of the Russian Orthodox Church. They began appointing their own bishops, and they would be bishops who were okay with communism and who were going along with the party line. So that leads to some real issues. Like it says, the pressing question was whether continuing allegiance to Moscow is possible in a situation where an anti-religious communist regime now controlled the patriarchate. So one solution to that is what's called the Orthodox Church in America. These were Russian Orthodox who, this is where most of the Russian Orthodox went. They became their own independent church. They were ethnically Russian, but they no longer took their cues from the Russian Orthodox Church in the homeland, the way that the others were doing. And they became what's called autocephelous. That means that they have their own head. They have a patriarch in America. Like it says, their headquarters is in Syosset, New York, and they have 9 dioceses. They have their own seminaries. And they've produced a lot of important theologians. Then there was the patriarchal parishes of the Russian Orthodox Church in the United States and Canada. I'm just going to abbreviate that. Patriarchal parishes of the Russian Orthodox Church in the United States and Canada. These are ones who maintain direct ties with Moscow. There's never been a lot of them. And then there was what's called the Russian Orthodox Church. Outside of Russia. So the Russian community gets split into several different groups. They didn't acknowledge the Moscow leadership in any way. These guys eventually reconciled with the Moscow leadership, and that's the main split between them. Notice that all of them have seminaries in New York. The largest church, besides Orthodox Church in America, is the Greek Orthodox Church in the United States, because the Greeks were the largest set of immigrants. And like it says, there were a lot of splits within the community, but they never actually became full schisms. It tells you about their seminary as well. And then it talks about a number of other groups: the Albanians, Antiochian, Bulgarian, Romanian, Ruthenian, Serbian, Ukrainian branches, just for some. All of these are Orthodox, and all of these are continuing the same traditions. Bless you. Now, one of the other things that your book talks about that's particularly important is that there have been a lot of conversions in recent years to Orthodoxy. Why would people be attracted to Eastern Orthodoxy? A lot of people are born into it. If you're a Greek, odds are, if your family is religious at all, you're probably a Greek Orthodox Christian, and then you'll probably stick with that, unless you decide you want to become a Baptist or a Methodist or a Lutheran or a Catholic or something along those lines, or maybe convert to Islam, right? Where are they going to get converts from? Why would people convert to Eastern Orthodoxy? Think about, all that it entails. Eastern Orthodox services. How long do you think a regular, like say Catholic church service runs? How long usually would you say? Not Christmas time or Easter.
45 minutes.
Yeah, that's known as 45 minutes. That's like if it goes beyond that, quite often the priest will get chewed out. Right, what are you doing? Now, Orthodox services are a bit longer than that. There's a lot more going on. What else do you remember about some of the key differences? Remember about the iconostasis and the consecration of the bread and the wine actually happens behind the wall of the icon. Things are slower. Tends to be a lot of incense, a lot of things going on. Why would people be attracted to that? What are they looking for, do you think? What could you imagine they want from that? A number of Protestant theologians in recent years have converted and become Eastern Orthodox. They're attracted to ritual. They're attracted to these practices that have deep and lasting significance that people have been doing for centuries and sometimes even millennia. They're attracted to becoming part of this, ongoing community. So that's something that's been going on, and like your book says, that creates tensions. Because you know how it is in any group. You've got people who are sort of like just born into the group, and then you got people who come in from the outside and they're a little bit more on fire, they're a little bit more into it. They don't always get along, do they? The people who were there before are like, hey, you're an outsider. Who are you to tell us, what we ought to be doing? People coming in from the outside are often looking at the people who are born into it and saying, boy, you're really not into this, are you? Why do you even bother? And, it leads to some conflicts from time to time. So that's one tension that's going on. Another issue is intermarriage. So here in the United States, especially today, if you're Orthodox, odds are you have a good chance of marrying somebody who's not Orthodox. And then the question is, which church are you going to go to? Are you going to keep going to church? Which are you going to bring the children to? Orthodoxy is one of those sorts of things where, because it is tied in with ethnicity, intermarriage is seen as possibly diluting it, or possibly enriching it, depending on how you look at it.